A woman who once ran a household of 11 people now owns 3 shirts, 1 blanket, and a paper cup with $4.60 in it. She has not eaten a hot meal in 6 days. In her coat pocket, wrapped in a plastic bag to keep out the rain, is a small wooden hairbrush with a chipped handle and a single strand of gray hair still caught in the bristles, the only thing she saved from a house fire that took everything else 19 years ago. 2 years from now, that same brush will sit inside a glass case in a children's hospital lobby in Detroit, Michigan, under a small brass plate that reads "For the ones who raised us." But on this particular morning, on Woodward Avenue, a man named Elliot Cross steps out of a black car in a gray wool coat, glances at a woman sitting against a shuttered storefront, and stops walking. He was on his way to close a $400 million deal. He did not expect what he saw. Elliot Cross was 44 years old. He was the founder and majority owner of Cross Harbor Logistics, a shipping and freight company with terminals in 9 states. He had grown up in a small brick house on Chalmers Street on the east side of Detroit, the only child of a mother who worked double shifts at a laundry service and a father who left before Elliot turned 4. For 6 years, from the time he was 5 until he was 11, the person who fed him, walked him to school, checked his homework, and sat with him during thunderstorms was not his mother. It was a woman his mother paid $80 a week to watch him while she worked. Her name was Dorothy Mae Simmons. Dorothy was 31 years old when she first knocked on the door of that brick house on Chalmers Street. She had a 2-year-old daughter of her own and a husband who worked at an auto parts plant on the afternoon shift. She needed the extra money the same way half the street needed extra money. What she gave Elliot's mother was not just childcare. She gave the boy a rhythm to his days. She made him oatmeal with brown sugar every single morning, no matter what. She sat on the edge of his bed during storms and told him the thunder was just the sky clearing its throat. She kept a small wooden hairbrush in her bag, the one her own mother had given her, and she would brush his hair before school and tell him a man walks into a room like he already belongs there. Elliot did not remember much of the actual words. He remembered the feeling. He remembered that for 6 years, someone chose him every single day, even though she was paid to and did not have to choose him beyond the paycheck. When Elliot turned 11, his mother remarried and moved the family to Ohio for his stepfather's job. Dorothy came to say goodbye. She knelt down, took the hairbrush out of her bag, and pressed it into his hand. She told him a boy needs one thing that is only his. He kept that brush in a drawer for 3 years before he lost track of it during a move, and then, the way things go, he lost track of Dorothy too. He wrote her name once on a college application essay about the person who shaped him most. He thought about looking for her twice, once after his first company sold, once after his mother's funeral. He never did. 28 years passed. 3 weeks before he saw her on Woodward Avenue, Dorothy Mae Simmons was living in a 1-bedroom apartment on the west side with her daughter, Renata, and Renata's husband, Marcus. Dorothy's own husband had passed 9 years earlier from a heart condition. Her daughter's marriage was under strain, not from cruelty, but from money. Marcus had lost his job at a warehouse distribution center 7 months earlier when the facility automated 40% of its floor positions. Renata worked as a home health aide, earning $14 an hour, and the 3 of them were $420 short on rent every single month, a gap they had been closing with a credit card that had finally maxed out. On the morning of the eviction notice, Marcus did something he would spend the rest of his life trying to undo. He told Renata that her mother needed to find somewhere else to stay, at least for a while, because the apartment could not carry a 4th mouth to feed on top of the rent shortfall. He did not say it cruelly. He said it the way people say things when they are drowning and looking for anything to hold on to. Renata argued. Dorothy, listening through the thin apartment wall, packed her single suitcase before the argument even finished, because she had spent her whole life being the one who did not want to be a burden. She left a note on the kitchen table. It said, "I raised you not to worry about me. Go live your life. Mama loves you." She had $1,100 saved from years of small jobs, folding laundry for a dry cleaner 3 days a week, watching a neighbor's grandchildren on weekends. $1,100 sounds like something until you understand what a single motel room costs in a city like Detroit for 30 nights running. Within 5 weeks it was gone. She tried 2 shelters, both at capacity, both with waitlists longer than winter. On the 14th night without a bed, she sat down against the security gate of a shuttered shoe store on Woodward Avenue with a paper cup, because pride, she had learned, is a coat you cannot afford to keep wearing when the temperature drops far enough. 2 miles away and 3 days later, Elliot Cross was finishing a phone call with his chief financial officer about the freight acquisition when his driver slowed the car for a red light on Woodward. Elliot glanced out the window out of habit, the way people glance at nothing in particular, and his eyes caught a woman's face, thin now, weathered by cold, but the shape of the jaw and the specific way she tilted her head while she looked down were etched somewhere in him that no amount of time had touched. He told his driver to pull over. He did not know why yet. His body understood before his mind did. He got out of the car and crouched down in front of her, and Dorothy Mae Simmons looked up at a stranger in an expensive coat and did not recognize him at all. Why would she? The boy she brushed hair for and sang thunder songs to had been 11 years old the last time she saw him, and this was a grown man with lines around his eyes and gray at his temples. She thanked him for whatever he was about to give her, the way she thanked everyone, with a tired politeness that had worn its way into a habit. Elliot asked her name. She told him, Dorothy Mae Simmons. He asked if she had ever lived on Chalmers Street. Her eyes changed then, sharpened, wary the way a person gets wary when a stranger knows something they should not know. He said, I was 5 years old and you used to brush my hair before school with a wooden brush your mother gave you. Dorothy Mae Simmons put her hand over her mouth and did not speak for 11 seconds, and in that silence, Elliot Cross understood that this was not a coincidence he was going to walk away from. What happened next moved fast, faster than either of them expected, because Elliot did not do the thing people do in movies where they hand someone cash and drive away feeling good about themselves. He called his assistant from the sidewalk and asked her to book the nearest hotel room with a private bathroom, same day, no questions. He called his personal doctor and asked for a house call, meaning a hotel room call, within the hour. He sat on the curb next to Dorothy for 40 minutes while the car idled, and she told him in pieces about the fire 19 years earlier that took her husband's tools and her mother's Bible and nearly everything else, about the heart condition that took her husband 9 years ago, about the eviction and the note on the kitchen table. She did not tell him about Marcus's words. She protected her daughter's marriage even sitting on a sidewalk with nothing to her name. That, more than anything, told Elliot exactly who she still was. By the second week, Dorothy was in a small furnished apartment Elliot's company managed for visiting executives, paid for indefinitely, no lease, no conditions attached. She resisted at first. She told him she did not want charity, that she had raised him, not adopted him, and that a debt between a nanny and a child does not roll over into a debt owed 40 years later. Elliot told her something that mattered to him more than the money did. He said, "You are not a debt I am paying. You are the only person who ever chose me for free. Let me choose you back." Renata found her mother 9 days after the sidewalk, not through Elliot, but because a woman from Dorothy's old church recognized her in the neighborhood and mentioned it to Renata's aunt, who mentioned it to Renata. When Renata arrived at the apartment, she cried before she said a single word, and Marcus stood behind her in the doorway, unable to look at Dorothy directly, carrying a guilt that had not eased for one single day since the note on the kitchen table. Dorothy did what she had always done. She hugged her daughter first, and then she reached past her and took Marcus's hand, because she understood, better than most people ever will, that a man who is drowning sometimes lets go of the wrong hand. At the 6-week mark, a local news producer named Angela Ruiz, who covered human interest stories for a Detroit affiliate, heard about the story through a hospital social worker Dorothy had mentioned it to in passing. Angela filmed a 4-minute segment. It aired on a Tuesday evening broadcast. Within 11 days, the clip had been clipped and reposted, and had been viewed across platforms more than 200,000 times, mostly because of 9 seconds in the middle where Dorothy holds up the wooden hairbrush, the same one, somehow kept safe in a church donation box for 11 years after she gave it away a second time during a moment of financial desperation, and a stranger who had bought it at a thrift sale for 50 cents recognized her face from the news and drove 3 hours to return it to her. Elliot did not appear in most of the story publicly. He asked Angela to keep his name out of it, not because he was ashamed, but because the story, he said, was never supposed to be about him. He gave instead. He funded a scholarship in Dorothy's name at the elementary school on Chalmers Street for children whose parents worked 2 jobs. He helped Marcus get an interview at a logistics coordination role inside Cross Harbor's Detroit terminal, not as a favor with no strings, but through the same hiring process every other applicant went through, because Elliot understood that a man who is handed something he did not earn cannot use it to stand up straight again. Marcus got the job on his own qualifications, and 6 months later he was training new hires. 18 months after the morning on Woodward Avenue, the Children's Hospital in Detroit opened a small family resource wing funded quietly by Cross Harbor Logistics, with no plaque bearing Elliot's name anywhere in the building. In the lobby, behind a small pane of glass, sits a wooden hairbrush with a chipped handle, and beneath it a brass plate that reads "For the ones who raised us." Dorothy was there for the ribbon cutting, in a green dress her daughter picked out, standing next to a grandson she had met only 4 months earlier, a boy named Elliot Marcus Simmons Cole, named half for the man on the sidewalk and half for the father who found his way back. She still lives in that same small apartment, though it is a lease in her name now, one she insisted on paying for herself once Marcus's new job steadied the family enough that she could contribute rather than only receive. She works 2 mornings a week reading to children at the same elementary school on Chalmers Street, a volunteer, unpaid, because she says a person needs a reason to get up that has nothing to do with money. On a Sunday evening not long after the ribbon cutting, Elliot came to her apartment for dinner, something he now did most weeks, not as a benefactor checking on an investment, but as a man visiting the closest thing he had left to a mother. Renata cooked. Marcus set the table. The babies slept in a bassinet in the corner. Dorothy brushed her grandson's thin hair with the same wooden brush, out of the glass case for the evening on loan from the hospital display, and she told him, quietly, the same thing she used to tell a boy on Chalmers Street. A man walks into a room like he already belongs there. Elliot sat at the table and said nothing. He only watched her hands move through the child's hair, the way they had moved through his own hair 40 years earlier, and understood that some debts are not paid off. They are simply carried forward, gently, into the next pair of hands. Would you have recognized her? Would you have stopped the car? Leave your answer below. I will see you in the next one. This story is a work of fiction. It does not depict real individuals or events. It draws on patterns that are common in real life: elder homelessness, housing instability tied to sudden job loss, and the quiet debts owed to caregivers, issues faced by many families. If you or someone you know is facing housing instability, 211 org can connect you with local emergency assistance and shelter resources.